Good morning, students. Say your prayer. நான் ஒரு நல்லாசிரியர். நான் உங்களுக்கு தாயாகவும் தந்தையாகவும் இருந்து முறையாக அன்போடு கல்வியை போதிப்பேன். நான் ஒரு நல்லாசிரியர். நான் உங்களுக்கு தாயாகவும் தந்தையாகவும் இருந்து முறையாக அன்போடு கல்வியை போதிப்பேன். நான் ஒரு நல்லாசிரியர். நான் உங்களுக்கு தாயாகவும் தந்தையாகவும் இருந்து முறையாக அன்போடு கல்வியை போதிப்பேன். Okay, students. Good morning. Take your social science book. Take page number 120. So 10th unit in history. So today we will discuss about some of the social reformers of Tamil Nadu. So Rettamile Srinivasan, M.C. Raja. Then we will discuss about labor movement in Tamil Nadu, then language agitation before Indian independence, then finally about women's movement in Tamil Nadu. So in previous class we discussed about Periyar and Justice Party. Okay, so today we will discuss about some of the important persons. So today, the last class in history. So 10th unit. So we will complete in today's class. Okay, so overall we have completed all the unit in history. So if you have any doubt in our previous lessons, so you can contact me. Okay, so recall what we discussed in our previous class. So in our previous class we discussed about South Indian Liberal Federation. So it was started by some of the important non-Brahmin leaders. So since the federation, so the South Indian Liberal Federation, so published a newspaper called Justice in English. It was called as Justice Party. It was referred as Justice Party. So they only formed the first Indian ministry in Madras Presidency in the year 1920. Then we discussed about the programs and activities. So they only removed the legal hindrances that restrict the intercaste marriages, and they supported the improvement of the depressed class people. Okay, and also they were the first. So the Justice Party were the first government to approve the participation of women in the election in the year 1921. So that's why Muthulakshmi Ammayar, she became the first woman legislator in India in the year 1926. Then we discussed about the communal government orders. Then they established the staff selection board in order to select the government officials. So on this formula, so Indian government, British Indian government adopted this pattern and established the Public Service Commission. And also they introduced the Hindu Religious Endowment Act in the year 1926. Then we discussed about self-respect movement. So that is Suyam Maryadi Iyakam. So started by Periyar EVR. So we discussed about the life history of Periyar EVR. So he was called as Vaikam hero. And his original name was E.V. Ramasamy, but he was given the title Periyar. Then we discussed about his anti-Hindi agitation. Then finally we discussed about Periyar, a feminist. Then his work and also his newspapers. So we discussed about the life history of Periyar and his contribution to Tamil society. Okay, so today we will discuss about another social reformer, Rettamile Srinivasan and M.C. Raja. And also some of the important movement in Tamil Nadu in 20th century. So Rettamile Srinivasan. So who was Rettamile Srinivasan? So Rettamile Srinivasan was born in 1859 at Kanjipuram. So Rettamile Srinivasan was born in 1859 at Kanjipuram. He fought for social justice, equality and civil rights of the marginalized sector in the caste order. So Rettamile Srinivasan, born in 1859 at Kanjipuram, he fought for the social justice, equality and civil rights of the marginalized. So marginalized means, in caste section, so they were the low caste people. So that is depressed class people. So he fought for the social justice, equality and civil rights of the depressed class people. So he was honored with titles. So he was given, praised with several titles such as Rao Sahib in the year 1926, then Rao Bahadur in the year 1930, then Diwan Bahadur in the year 1936 for his selfless social service. So for his selfless social service, so he was honored with titles such as Rao Sahib, Rao Bahadur and Diwan Bahadur. His autobiography. So his autobiography means so those who write their life history by their own. Okay, so that is autobiography. His autobiography name was Jeeviya Sarida Surukam. So that is a brief autobiography published in the year 1939. Is one of the earliest autobiography. His autobiography Jeeviya Sarida Surukam that is a brief autobiography, so which was published in the year 1939, is one of the earliest autobiography. Rattamali Srinivasan. So he had experienced the horrors of the untouchability. So he worked for the progress of the deprived class. Okay, wow. So Rattamali Srinivasan, he had experienced the horrors of the untouchability. So he worked for the development of the depressed class. So he founded the Adi Dravida Mahajana Sabha in the year 1893. So Rattamali Srinivasan, so who had experienced the horrors, so the tough time of the untouchability, had worked for the development of the deprived caste. So he founded the Adi Dravida Mahajana Sabha in the year 1893. Then he served as a president of the Scheduled Caste Federation and the Madras Provincial Depressed Class Federation. So Rattamali Srinivasan, who had experienced the horrors of the untouchability, so worked for the progress of the deprived caste. He founded the Adi Dravida Mahajana Sabha in the year 1893. Then he served as the president of the Scheduled Caste Federation and the Madras Provincial Depressed Class Federation. So Rattamali Srinivasan, a close associate of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So he was a close associate of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He participated in the first and second roundtable conferences held in London between 1930 to 1931. So he was a close associate of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So he participated in the first and second roundtable conferences held in London. And he voiced, and he supported the opinions of the marginalized sections of the society. So he also participated in the first and second roundtable conferences along with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in London, and he voiced and he gave the voice to the opinions of the marginalized section of the society. He was a signatory to the Pune Pact of 1932. So Pune Pact, which was signed between Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi. So Rattamali Srinivasan, so he was a signatory. So signatory, a person, a country or an organization that has signed an official agreement. So Rattamali Srinivasan, so he also signed the Pune Pact. So along with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Rattamali Srinivasan, so he was a signatory. That means, so he also signed an official agreement in the year 1932. So Rattamali Srinivasan, born in 1859 at Kanjipuram, he fought for the social justice, equality and civil rights of the depressed class people. So he was honored with several titles. His autobiography name was G.V. Sarida Surukam, published in the year 1939. So he had founded the Adi Dravida Mahajana Sabha in the year 1893. So because already he had experienced the horrors of the untouchability, so he wanted to work for the development of the depressed class. He served as the president of the Scheduled Caste Federation and also the Madras Provincial Depressed Class Federation. So he was the close associate of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So he participated in the first and second roundtable conferences held in London. He was a signatory to the Pune Pact of 1932. Then M.C. Raja. So M.C. Raja, Mailai Chinnathambi Raja, popularly known as M.C. Raja, was one of the prominent leaders from the depressed class. M.C. Raja, so his full name was Mailai Chinnathambi Raja. So he was one of the prominent leaders from the depressed class. Raja started his career as a teacher and wrote different textbooks for schools and colleges. So Mailai Chinnathambi Raja wrote so different textbooks for schools and colleges. He started his career as a school teacher. He was one of the founding members of the South Indian Liberal Federation. So he was one of the founding members of the South Indian Liberal Federation, that is Justice Party. Already we have seen so nearly 30 non-Brahmin members so met in 1916 and started the South Indian Liberal Federation. Among the founding members, so M.C. Raja was also one of the person. He became the first elected legislative council member from the year 1920 to 1926 from the depressed class in the Madras province. So M.C. Raja, he became the first elected legislative council member of the depressed class. He functioned as the deputy leader of the Justice Party in the Madras Legislative Council. So M.C. Raja, he functioned as the deputy leader. So deputy leader of the Justice Party in the Madras Legislative Council. In 1928, he founded the All India Depressed Class Association and was its long-time leader. In 1928, M.C. Raja founded the All India Depressed Class Association and he was its long-time leader. So Mailai Chinnathambi Raja, popularly known as M.C. Raja, was one of the most important leader from the depressed class. He started his career as a school teacher and he wrote a different textbook so for schools and colleges. He was one of the founding members of the South Indian Liberal Federation, that is Justice Party. Then he became the first elected legislative council member from the depressed class in Madras province, and he functioned as the deputy leader of the Justice Party in the Madras Legislative Council. In the year 1928, he founded the All India Depressed Class Association, and he was its long-time leader. So next, labor movement in Tamil Nadu. So the First World War, so fought between 1914 to 1918, so provided stimulus to industrial growth in India. Yes, the First World War, so supported the industrial growth in India. So these industries, so which caters to the wartime need. So the industries which were started during the First Time World War, so they supported the war. So the wartime needs, so had employed a huge number of workers. At the end of the war, there were retrenchment across the industries. So at the end of the First World War, there were retrenchment. So retrenchment to reduce cost or to spend less money by government organization, etc. So after by the end of the First World War, so there were retrenchment across the industries as the wartime requirement receded. So receded. So to move gradually away from somebody or away from a previous position. So because, so these industries, so supported, so they supplied the wartime needs. So like weapons, the materials for the soldiers. So there were a demand for these industries. But by the end of the war, so these industries, there is no need for these industries. So combined with the high prices, this gave a momentum to the labor movement. So combined with the high prices. So since there was a large number of unemployment. So because these industries, so which was started in supporting the war, so which gave the needs of the war, so which supplied the needs of the war, were now in the condition to be closed. So combined with these problems, there were increase in price. So this gave a momentum to the labor movement. So B.P. Vadia, M. Singaravelar, Thiru V. Kalyansundaram and others initiated the formation of the labor union in the Madras Presidency. So B.P. Vadia, M. Singaravelar, Thiru V. Kalyansundaram and others initiated the formation of labor union in Madras Presidency. So the First World War, fought between 1914 to 1918, provided stimulus to the industrial growth in India. So these industries, so catering to wartime needs, had employed a large number of workers. At the end of the war, there were retrenchment across the industries. So there were a reduce in the number of industries. So because the wartime requirement is not needed. So combined with the high prices, this gave a momentum. So this gave a chance to the labor movement. B.P. Vadia, M. Singaravelar, Thiru V. Kalyansundaram and others. So they initiated the formation of labor unions in the Madras Presidency. In 1918, India's first organized trade union, the Madras Labour Union, was formed. So in the year 1918, India's first organized trade union, the Madras Labour Union, was formed. So India's first labour union was Madras Labour Union, which was formed at the end of the First World War, so 1918. So because during the time, the 1942 to 1918, so there are large number of industries which were started in thought that the wartime, so wartime require more number of weapons. The wartime require more number of materials for the soldiers. But by the end of the war, so what happened? So there is no need for such industries. So at the same time, so there was increase in price. So there was increase in price. So that only supported the formation of labor movement. So in the year 1918, so India's first organized trade union, so the Madras Labour Union was formed. The first All India Trade Union Conference, AITUC, the first All India Trade Union Conference was held on 31st October 1920 in Bombay. So the first AITUC conference was held on 31st October 1920 in Bombay. The delegates, the persons who participated in a conference. So the delegates discussed several resolutions. This included a demand for protection from police interference in labor disputes, the maintenance of an unemployment register, restriction on exporting foodstuff, compensation for injuries and health insurance. So the first All India Trade Union Conference was held on 31st October 1920 in Bombay. So the first conference held on 31st October 1920 in Bombay. So the delegates, so the participants of the conference had discussed several resolutions. So some of the resolutions included a demand for protection from police interference in labor disputes. So demand for protection from the police interference in labor disputes. The maintenance of an unemployment register. So the maintenance of unemployment register. Then restriction on exporting foodstuff. So while exporting the foodstuff, there should be some restrictions. There should be a lot of restrictions. Then compensation for injuries. So compensation for injuries for the laborers. So those who are working in industries. And also health insurance. So these were some demands included in their resolution. M. Singaravelar was a pioneer in the labor movement activities in the Madras Presidency. So M. Singaravelar, along with B.P. Vadia and 3 V. Kalyana Sundaranar, initiated the formation of labor union in Madras Presidency. So among them, M. Singaravelar was a pioneer. So he was the forerunner in the labor movement activities in Madras Presidency. So he was born in Madras and graduated from the Presidency College, University of Madras. So he was born in Madras and he got his graduation from the Presidency College, the University of Madras. He advocated Buddhism in his early life. So he knew many languages. So Singaravelar know many languages, so including Tamil, English, Urdu, Hindi, German, French and Russian. And he also wrote about the ideas of Karl Marx, Charles Darwin, Herbert Spencer and Albert Einstein in Tamil. So the famous persons. So he knew many languages which include Tamil, English, Urdu, Hindi, Germany, French and Russian. And he also wrote about the ideas of Karl Marx, who was the supporter of socialism. So his principles were considered the birth of socialism and communism. Then Charles Darwin, so you know about him. Then Herbert Spencer and Albert Einstein. He organized the first ever celebration of May Day in 1923. So what is May Day? Labor's Day. So when it was celebrated? On May 1. So he organized the first ever celebration of May Day in 1923. So he was one of the early leaders of the Communist Party of India. So M. Singaravelar, one of the early leaders of the Communist Party of India. He published a Tamil newspaper called as Tholilalan, that is worker, to address the problems of the working class. He published a Tamil newspaper called as Tholilalan to address the problems of the working class. He was closely associated with the Periyar and self-respect movement. So M. Singaravelar, he was closely associated with the Periyar and self-respect movement. So M. Singaravelar was a pioneer in the labor movement activities in the Madras Presidency. So he was born in Madras and graduated from Presidency College, University of Madras. He also advocated Buddhism in his early life and he knew many languages. So Tamil, English, Urdu, Hindi, German, French and Russian. And he wrote about the ideas of Karl Marx, Charles Darwin, Herbert Spencer and Albert Einstein in Tamil. So he organized the first ever celebration of May Day in 1923. And he published a newspaper called as Tholilalan to address the problem of the working class. So he was one of the early leaders of the Communist Party of India. He was closely associated with Periyar and the self-respect movement. So next, language agitation before Indian independence. So language agitation before Indian independence. In general, language is a dominant symbol of identity and is associated with the culture and sentiments of any society. So generally, language is a symbol of identity. So if you say, who are you means, we say we are Tamilan. If you ask any other persons, so they mention themselves by their country name or by their language identity only. So language is the dominant symbol of identity and is associated with the culture and sentiments of any society. So Tamil regained. So regained means to get back something you no longer have, especially an ability or a quality. So to regain means to get back something after a longer time. So Tamil regained its prominence in the latter half of 19th and early 20th century. So Tamil regained its importance in the latter half of 19th and early 20th century. Maraimalai Adigal's pure Tamil movement, the language reforms of Periyar and Tamil is a movement helped to galvanize the Tamil language. So Maraimalai Adigal's pure Tamil movement. So Tani Tamil Iyakam. Then the language reforms of Thandai Periyar and also Tamil is a movement. So helped to understand the Tamil language, helped to regain the importance of Tamil language. So Tamil Renaissance that led the Dravidian consciousness made a great intervention in the development of modern Tamil language and its forms. So Tamil Renaissance that led the Dravidian consciousness made a great impact in the development of modern Tamil language and its art form and its written form. So actually agamic temples. So what is agamic temples? So they do the ceremony and ritual activities so based on the Vedas. So that is called as agamic temples. So agamic temples did not permit the rituals in Tamil. So Tamil songs had marginal place in musical concerns. Abraham Pandita systematically studied the history of Tamil music and attempted to reconstruct the ancient Tamil musical system. So he founded the Tanjore Sangeeta Vidya Mahajana Sangam in 1912 and it became the kernel of the Tamil Isai movement. So kernel is the central or the most important part of an idea. The movement gave importance to the singing of Tamil compositions in music concerts. So the Tamil Isai movement, so Tamil music movement, so gave importance to the singing of Tamil compositions in music concerts. The first Tamil Isai conference was held in 1943 to discuss the status of Tamil music. So the first Tamil Isai conference so was held in 1943 to discuss the status of the Tamil music. So generally, language is the most important symbol of identity and is associated with the culture and sentiments of any society. So Tamil regained its prominence only in the latter half of 19th century and early 20th century. So because of the activities of Maramalai Adigal's pure Tamil movement, the language reforms of Periyar and Tamil Isai movement, which helped to galvanize the Tamil language. So agamic temples, so they did not permit the rituals in Tamil. So Tamil songs had a marginal place. So Tamil songs, so they had no much importance in the musical concerns. But Abraham Pandita, so he reconstructed the ancient Tamil musical system. So he founded the Tanjavur Sangeeta Vidya Mahajana Sangam in 1912 and it became the important part of the Tamil Isai movement. So the movement gave importance to the singing of Tamil composition, so Tamil songs in music concert. The first Tamil Isai conference was held in 1943 to discuss the status of Tamil music. So then the implementation of Hindi as a compulsory language in Tamil Nadu at a various point of time was seen as the threat to Tamil language and culture. So the implementation of Hindi as a compulsory language in Tamil Nadu at a various point of time. So that is before independence and even after independence. So Hindi was implemented as compulsory subject. So it was seen as a threat to Tamil language and culture. So Periyar declared that the introduction of Hindi over Tamil would deny the Dravidians of their job opportunities. So Periyar declared that the introduction of Hindi over Tamil language would deny the Dravidians over their job opportunities. So Maramalai Adigal pointed out that the Tamil language would suffer with the introduction of Hindi. So Maramalai Adigal, he also pointed out that the Tamil language would suffer a lot with the introduction of Hindi. The anti-Hindi campaigners considered it an ideological battle against Brahmanism and the hegemony of Sanskrit over Tamil. So the anti-Hindi campaigners considered so the implementation of Hindi as a compulsory subject is a battle, is an ideological battle against the Brahmanism and the hegemony of Sanskrit over Tamil. So that is hegemony means so control over another thing. So if they allow Hindi means then so Hindi and Sanskrit will slowly occupy Tamil language. So that's why so the Tamil supporters, so the language supporters, so tooth and nail opposed to the implementation of Hindi language. Then the women movement. So there were several streams of women movement under the organizations established in the early 20th century to address the question of women empowerment in Madras Presidency. So there were several streams of, so several group of women movements and organizations established in early 20th century. So in order to question the women empowerment in Madras Presidency, Women India Association, All India Women Conference are the important among them in Tamil Nadu. So Women India Association and All India Women Conference. So there are several streams of women's movement and organizations established in the early 20th century in order to improve the status of women in Madras Presidency. So important among them were Women's India Association and All India Women's Conference. So Women's India Association, so WIA, was started in 1917 by Annie Besant, then Dorothy Jinarajadasa and Margaret Cousins at Adayar in Madras. So WIA, so Women's India Association, was started in 1917 by Mrs. Annie Besant. So those who started the Home Rule movement. and also Dorothy Jinarajadasa and Margaret Cousins at Adyar in Madras. The association published a pamphlet. So pamphlet is a small piece of papers. And bulletins. So bulletins, a printed report that gives news about an organization or a group. So a printed report that gives news about an organization or a group. So the association published pamphlets and bulletins in different languages to detail the problems of personal hygiene, marriage law, voting rights, child care, and women role in the public. In the meantime, WAA formed the All India Women Conference in 1927 to address the problem of women's education and recommended that the government implement various policies for the upliftment of women. So in the early 20th century itself, so there are several women's movement organizations established so in order to address the question of the women empowerment in Madras Presidency. So WAA, AWC are important among them. So WAA, Women's India Association, was started in 1917. So they published pamphlets and bulletins in different languages in order to address the problem of personal hygiene, marriage law, voting rights, child care, and women's role in the public. In the meantime, WAA formed the All India Women's Conference in 1927 to address the problem of women education and recommended that the government should implement various policies for the uplift of women. So women liberation was one of the important objectives of the self-respect movement. So Periyar, so he gave importance to women also. So he thought women should be treated equally as with men. So that's why he supported that the ancestral property should be given equal share to women. And also he supported women education. So women's liberation was one of the important objectives of self-respect movement. So self-respecters led by Periyar EVR worked for gender equality and gender sensitization of the society. So self-respect leaders, so led by Periyar, worked for the gender equality and gender sensitization of the society. The movement provided a space for women to share their ideas. The self-respect movement so provided a space for women. So there is a space for women in the self-respect movement so in order to share their ideas. So there were several women activities in the movement. So like Muthulakshmi Ammayar, Nagammai, Kannamma, Neelavati, Moovulu Ramamirdam, Rukmani Ammal, Alarmel Mangai Thayammal, Neelambigai, and Sivagami Chidambaram are prominent among them. So in the self-respect movement, so they gave equal importance to women also. So there are women activities. So several women activities in the self-respect movement. So important among them were Muthulakshmi Ammayar, Nagammai, Kannamma, Neelavati, Moovulu Ramamirdam, Rukmani Ammal, Alarmel Mangai Thayammal, Neelambigai, and Sivagami Chidambaram. So the last, Devadasi system. So there was a custom of dedicating young girls to the Hindu temples as a servant of God, known as Devadasi. So there was a custom of dedicating young girls to the Hindu temples as a servant of God. So that means Devadasi. Deva means God. So Dasi means so slave or servant. So that's why they were called as Devadasi. Though intended as a service to God, it soon get corrupted, leading to the extensive immorality and abuse of the women. So though it was initially told as service to God. So Devadasi means service to God. It soon got corrupted. It soon got corrupted, leading to extensive immorality. Immoral means it was not moral. And they misuse the women's. So Dr. Muthulakshmi Ammayar was in the forefront of the campaign, pressing for the legislation to abolish this Devadasi system. So Dr. Muthulakshmi Ammayar was in forefront of the campaign, which imposed a lot of press. So they gave pressure to the government. So in order to pass a law to abolish the Devadasi system. The Madras Devadasi, so that is Prevention of Dedication Act 1947 was enacted by the government. So there was a custom of dedicating young girls to the Hindu temples as a servant of God, known as Devadasi. Though intended as a service to God, it soon got corrupted, leading to extensive immorality and abuse of the women. Dr. Muthulakshmi Ammayar was in forefront of the campaign, so pressing for a legislation to abolish this Devadasi system. The Madras Devadasis Prevention of Dedication Act 1947 was enacted by the government to stop the Devadasi system. So actually, the act was passed enacted in the year 1947. But when it was introduced? So in 1930, Muthulakshmi Ammayar introduced the Madras Legislative Council a bill on the prevention of the dedication of women to Hindu temple in the Presidency of Madras. So in 1930 itself, Muthulakshmi Ammayar introduced in the Madras Legislative Council a bill on the prevention of the dedication of women to Hindu temples in the Madras Presidency. The bill, which later became the Devadasi Abolition Act, declared that the Pottukattu ceremony, so Pottukattu ceremony, that is the Devadasi ceremony, in the presence of Hindu temples or any other place of worship was unlawful, and gave legal sanction to the Devadasis to contract marriage, and prescribed a minimum punishment of 5 years of imprisonment for those who found guilty of aiding and abetting. So abetting, to help or encourage something. So those who helped the Devadasi system. The bill had to wait for over 15 years to become an act. So in 1930, Muthulakshmi Ammayar introduced in the Madras Legislative Council a bill on the prevention of the dedication of women to Hindu temples in the Presidency of Madras. The bill, which later became the Devadasi Abolition Act, declared the Pottukattu ceremony in the presence of Hindu temples. In the present means an area around a place or a building. So an area around a place or a building. So that is Pottukattu ceremony in the area around the Hindu temples or any other place of worship was unlawful, and gave legal sanction. So legal sanction to the Devadasis to get married, and also they prescribed a minimum punishment of 5 years for those who found guilty of aiding and supporting and encouraging the Devadasi system. But the bill had to wait for over 15 years to become an act. Okay students, so we have completed the 10th unit. So today's class we discussed about Rattamilai Srinivasan, then MC Raja, and also the labor movement in Tamil Nadu. So the first labor union, so Madras Labor Union, which was formed in the year 1918. Then we discussed about Singara Velar. So he was the important person in the labor movement activities in the Madras Presidency. So he is published in a newspaper called as Tholilalan. Then we discussed about language agitation before Indian independence. So language, so which so help us to understand about one's culture and identity. So we discussed about Tamil language. So the reforms of Tamil language. Then we discussed about anti-Hindi agitation. Then finally about women's movement in the early 20th century. So they played an important role in the upliftment of women. Then finally we discussed about Devadasi system. Okay, so overall we have completed all unit in history. Okay, so 10th unit we have completed. So in this unit we discussed about the important social reformers, and especially about Justice Party and self-respect movement. And initially we discussed about how Tamil language should regain its importance. So because of the activities of some of the scholars from Tamil Nadu and even foreign persons, so like Robert Caldwell and F.W. Ellis. So they played an important role in bringing Tamil language to its most important position. Okay, so if you have any doubt in this lesson, so please contact me. So today's homework again I will send you as PDF. So take care. So read well. So thank you students. Have a nice day.